Detroit doesn't lose its history all at once. It loses it one broken window at a time, one empty classroom at a time, one locked door, one fighter, one vote, one demolition contract, and eventually, a place that once held thousands of lives becomes a question. Do we save what's left, or do we let it go? Today, we're standing inside Thomas M. Cooley High School on Detroit's northwest side. A school built during Detroit's golden age. A school designed by one of the city's great architectural firms. A school named after one of the most important legal minds in Michigan history. And now, after years of vacancy, fires, vandalism, failed redevelopment attempts, alumni pushback, and one last bite to stop it, Cooley High School is set to be demolished. This isn't just an abandoned building. This is a record of what Detroit once believed education deserved to look like. Grand entrances, terracotta details, massive halls, an auditorium, a gym, a pool, a place built not just to hold students, but to inspire them. Before it disappears, we're taking one last look inside. I'm Chris Hubble. This is Streets of History. And today, we're walking through the story of Cooley High School before demolition. To understand Cooley, you have to start with where Detroit was when this building was born. The year was 1928. Detroit was exploding. The automobile industry had turned the city into one of the most important industrial centers in the world. Families were pouring in for work. Neighborhoods were stretching further from downtown. The northwest side of Detroit was growing fast, and the public school system had to keep up. Cooley High School was built at 15055 Hubble Avenue, near Hubble, Fenkell, and Chalfonte, to serve a part of the city that needed a major high school of its own. The National Park Service later recognized the building for both education and architecture, listing it as Mission Spanish Revival, with significant years of 1928 and 1930. That matters, because this wasn't just another public school. This was civic architecture. This was Detroit saying, our children deserve something permanent. Our neighborhoods deserve landmarks. Education deserves beauty. The building was designed by Donaldson and Meyer, a Detroit architectural firm whose work helped shape the city's architectural identity. Their portfolio included major religious, civic, residential, and commercial buildings across Detroit, including Cooley High School and the David Scott Building. Donaldson and Meyer weren't just designing walls and windows. They were designing symbols. John Donaldson, born in Scotland and trained in sculpture, formed a partnership with Henry J. Meyer in 1880. Together, their firm became part of the architectural language of Detroit. Churches, towers, schools, and landmarks that gave the city its sense of place. And here at Cooley, you can still see that ambition. Even in decay. Look at the entrance, the arches, the ornament, the details around the doors, the brickwork, the terracotta, the way the building announces itself before you even step inside. Cooley was designed in the Spanish or Mediterranean Revival tradition, a style that gave the school a sense of warmth, permanence, and almost old-world grandeur. Historic Detroit notes that Cooley opened in 1928 and was designed by Donaldson and Meyer, built to serve a rapidly growing area of Detroit at a cost of $758,270. And that was a serious investment, not just in a building, but in a neighborhood, in public education, in the idea that Detroit's future was going to be big, and the building itself was planned for movement. Classrooms stretched out through wings. The central areas held the spaces that turned a school into a community. Offices, library, auditorium, athletic facilities. Detroit Urbex describes Cooley's plan as an E-shaped layout with classrooms and outer wings connected to a central core.
This isn't just another real estate platform. This is something different. A place where every property has a story. Search with ease, but discover more than just location and price. Every space comes with context, history, and identity. You don't just see a home, you understand it. Want to sell, Create a listing that stands out by telling what makes your place unique. Save, share, and connect with people who value more than just square footage. We don't just sell homes. We take care of preserving and telling their story. Because every home has a story, let's discover yours. History loves company.
The school's auditorium was added in 1930, followed by a gymnasium and pool in 1931, and enrollment quickly grew to more than 3,400 students. Think about that number. More than 3,400 students. That's not a school. It's a small city. Every bell that rang here sent thousands of footsteps through these halls. Every stairwell carried generations. Every classroom held names, jokes, fights, friendships, report cards, first loves, last chances, and teachers trying to reach kids in a city that was changing every year. That's what's hard to understand when you only see the building now. You see broken glass. You see graffiti. You see peeling paint. You see a place people call blight. But before it was blight, it was pride. Before it was abandoned, it was packed. Before it was dangerous, it was daily life. And that's what makes Cooley so powerful. The ruins don't erase the past. They reveal how much past is still here. Now we have to talk about the name above the door. Thomas M. Cooley. Most people hear that name and think it must have been a principal, or a superintendent, or maybe someone who donated money. But Thomas McIntyre Cooley was something different. He was one of the most important legal minds that Michigan has ever produced. Cooley was born in Attica, New York in 1824. He studied law as a young man, came to Michigan in the 1840s, was admitted to the bar in 1846, and eventually became a professor, legal scholar, Michigan Supreme Court Justice, and chairman of the Interstate Commerce Commission. His life sounds almost impossible today. He did not come from some polished path of privilege. He built himself through law, writing, public service, and teaching. In 1857, Cooley was chosen by the Michigan legislature to compile the laws of the state. In 1858, he became a reporter of the Michigan Supreme Court. In 1859, when the University of Michigan created its law department, Cooley became one of its first 3 professors. Then in 1864, he was elected to the Michigan Supreme Court, where he served until 1885. That means the man whose name is carved into the school helped shape Michigan law during some of the most important years in American history. The Civil War, Reconstruction, the rise of railroads, the growth of cities, the expansion of public institutions, and one of the most meaningful parts of Cooley's legacy ties directly back to schools. Historic Detroit notes that a mural of Cooley in the school library described him as someone who helped establish the legal principle that made free high schools possible in Michigan. That is the part of this story that hits differently. This building was named after a man connected to the legal foundation of public high schools. And then Detroit built one of its grandest public high schools in his name. So Cooley High School wasn't just carrying a person's name. It was carrying an idea. That education should be public. That it should be accessible. That it should be worth investing in. That communities should have the power to build institutions for the future. Cooley also became nationally known for his legal writing. His book, Constitutional Limitations, became one of the most respected American legal works of its time. The Michigan Bar Journal notes that by 1886, the book was widely admired as one of the most authoritative works on American law, and Cooley was regarded by contemporaries as one of the great constitutional jurists of his generation. He also became connected to the earliest era of federal regulation. In 1887, President Grover Cleveland appointed him to the newly created Interstate Commerce Commission, where he served as chairman. That commission mattered because railroads were the arteries of the American economy, moving goods, people, and raw materials across the country. So when you stand in this building, you're not just standing in an old Detroit school. You're standing inside a building named for someone whose work touched education, constitutional law, transportation, federal power, and the structure of American public life. That makes the abandonment feel even heavier, because Cooley the man represented order, law, public purpose, civic responsibility, and Cooley the building became a symbol of what happens when civic responsibility breaks down. For decades, Cooley was alive. It was a neighborhood anchor, a place where families sent children year after year, a place where students became cardinals, a place where alumni still remember teachers, coaches, hallways, dances, games, fights, friendships, and moments that shaped who they became. That is the thing people outside Detroit sometimes miss. A school building is not just a facility. It becomes part of a family map. Where your mom went, where your uncle played ball, where your cousin graduated, where your grandfather walked to class, where someone met their wife, where someone found the teacher who believed in them. The walls absorb that. The building becomes memory, and Cooley had a lot of it. This school opened when Detroit was booming. It grew through the Great Depression. It sent students through World War II. It watched Detroit's auto industry rise to global power. It watched neighborhoods change. It watched the city struggle through segregation, integration, white flight, economic decline, and disinvestment. Detroit Urbex documents how Cooley's enrollment and demographics changed dramatically over time, especially through the 1960s and 1970s, as Detroit's public schools reflected the larger racial and neighborhood changes happening across the city. So Cooley's story is not simple. It is not just a pretty building that got old. It is a Detroit story, a story of growth, a story of opportunity, a story of race, a story of public education, a story of investment, and then disinvestment, and then abandonment. By the time Cooley closed in June of 2010, the building had become too large for the enrollment that it served. Historic Detroit notes that the school closed in 2010 and remained vacant afterward. And once a building like that goes vacant, time changes speed. A year of vacancy can feel like 10. Heat stops, maintenance stops, leaks spread, windows break, scrappers come, copper disappears, water gets in, paint peels, floors buckle, and then the building begins to tell a different story. Not the story it was built for, the story of what was left undone. In 2017, a major fire destroyed much of Cooley's auditorium. Historic Detroit records the fire as happening on October 1st of 2017, while Detroit Urbex describes the auditorium as being severely damaged after the Detroit Fire Department responded to a major blaze in late September 2017. That auditorium matters, because auditoriums are where a school becomes a community. Graduations, performances, assemblies, awards, speeches, parents with cameras, students walking across a stage. A building can survive losing classrooms, but when a school loses its auditorium, it loses part of its voice. And after that fire, the dream of saving Cooley became even harder. Not impossible, but harder. And that leads us to the fight. Cooley did not simply sit here with no one caring. People cared. A lot of people cared. Alumni cared. Neighbors cared. Preservationists cared. Detroiters who had never attended Cooley still cared because they understood what this building represented. For years, different ideas were raised for reuse. Apartments, community services, workforce development, a neighborhood hub, a resource center, a way to take a massive historic school and turn it back into something useful. One of the biggest efforts came through Life Remodeled, a nonprofit known for turning former school buildings into community hubs. Chalkbeat reported that Life Remodeled proposed acquiring Cooley and redeveloping it as a community hub through a $37.5 million investment. But Detroit Public Schools Community District rejected the offer in 2023 after concerns over commitments, funding benchmarks, and future use of the building and land. Historic Detroit also notes that after more than 3 years of negotiations, Life Remodeled offered $1 million for Cooley, but the offer was rejected in March of 2023. And that was a turning point, because with historic buildings, time is not neutral. Every year without a roof repair is a decision. Every winter without heat is a decision. Every broken window left open is a decision. Every delay costs money. Every delay removes options. And Cooley kept deteriorating. Then came the district's sports complex plan. In 2025, Detroit Public Schools Community District announced a plan to redevelop the Cooley site into a sports facility. The plan was framed as a way to create athletic opportunities for students in the surrounding community. Historic Detroit reported the project as a $25 million plan, with $15 million allocated by the state of Michigan and the remaining amount being pursued through fundraising. At first, there was hope that at least part of the historic building might survive. The plan initially discussed preserving a portion of Cooley for uses like a locker room, weight room, community gathering space, and alumni dedication. Bridge Detroit later reported that preserving the historic front facade would have added about $2 million, according to Superintendent Nikolai Vatai. But by June 2026, the district confirmed the full demolition would move forward. DPSCD said the building had caused blight, fires, and stress for local residents, and that the district secured a $15 million state grant that must be spent by September 30th, 2026. The district said the cost and timeline needed to preserve the facade were not feasible under the grant timeline, and that demolition had to happen first to begin the athletic complex. That is the tension at the heart of this story. On one side, you have a building that is historic, beautiful, and deeply meaningful. On the other side, you have neighbors who have lived next to a dangerous, vacant structure for years. On one side, alumni are asking why more wasn't done sooner. On the other side, the district is saying the building has become too costly and too unsafe to keep. On one side, preservation. On the other, redevelopment. And in the middle is Detroit, still trying to answer the same question it has faced again and again. How do we build the future without erasing the past? The new Cooley Sports Complex is planned in phases. Bridge Detroit reported that Phase 1 is set to include demolition of the building and resurfacing the walking track and natural turf field by September 30th, 2026. Phase 2, expected for fall 2028, is planned to include an artificial turf field, track, parking, and practice areas for shot put and discus. A third phase with an indoor complex has been discussed but is not currently funded. The district says the complex will serve nearby Cooley High School athletics, district students, community youth teams, and partners like Pop Warner and Detroit PAL. That part matters too, because this is not simply a story of villains and heroes. Kids need fields, neighborhoods need safe places, students deserve facilities, and residents deserve not to live besides an open, dangerous, and decaying building. But preservationists are asking a fair question. Why does the answer have to be total erasure? Why couldn't the entrance be saved? Why couldn't the facade remain? Why couldn't the old and the new stand together? At community meetings, alumni and residents voiced opposition of the demolition and asked how Cooley's legacy would be represented. Bridge Detroit reported that some alumni asked for some of the building to be saved, while others accepted the sports complex as a new chapter. And that divide is real. Some people see this building and see memories. Others see danger. Some see a landmark. Others see a burden. Some see what it was, and others see what it has become. And both can be true. That is why this story is so painful. Because by the time a building reaches this condition, the argument is no longer simply about architecture. It becomes about failure. Who failed it? Who could have saved it? Who waited too long? Who gets remembered? Who gets left out? And what do we owe to the people who came before us? The district has said that it plans to preserve pieces of Cooley. Not the full building, but pieces. DPSCD says it will preserve bricks, bell towers, terracotta medallions, and entry archways and reuse artifacts from the building to honor Cooley's history in the new athletic complex. The district also said it's committed to saving bricks for the alumni. And that's something. But for many alumni, it's not enough. Because a brick is not the building. A medallion is not the hallway. An archway is not the memory of walking through it every morning. A bell tower sitting somewhere else is not the same as looking up and seeing it rise above your neighborhood. Salvage is better than nothing, but salvage is also an admission. It says, we know this mattered. We know it had value. We know it meant something. We just couldn't or didn't save the whole thing. And that is the sadness of Cooley. Not that it got old. Historic buildings are supposed to get old. That's part of their beauty. The sadness is that it got abandoned. It was left long enough for saving it to become harder than replacing it. And once that happens, the city loses more than a brick. It loses continuity. So what do we do with a place like this? That's the move in this story. Because Streets of History is not just about standing in the past. It's about deciding what the past asks of us now. Cooley asks us to remember that buildings are not disposable just because they're old. It asks us to understand that public schools were once built as monuments to the future. It asks us to think about what happens when institutions leave neighborhoods behind. It asks us to listen to alumni before demolition is already scheduled. It asks us to take photographs, collect yearbooks, record stories, save signs, scan programs, interview teachers, document murals, preserve the names. Because once the building is gone, the memory has to live somewhere else. If you went to Cooley, this is the moment to tell your story. If your parents went here, ask them what they remember. If you have photos, yearbooks, jackets, trophies, programs, newspaper clippings, or home videos, don't leave them in a box where nobody sees them. Share them, digitize them, put names to faces, because this school's story should not end as a pile of debris. It should become an archive, a community record, a memory that survives the demolition. And for Detroit, Cooley should be a warning. Not every building can be saved, but every building can be respected earlier, before the roof fails, before the windows break, before the fires, before the grant deadline, before the only option left are demolition or danger. That is the lesson. Preservation cannot begin at the wrecking ball. It has to begin when the building is still standing strong enough to have a second life. Standing here now, inside these halls, it's impossible not to imagine what this place used to sound like. The bell, the lockers, the voices, the footsteps, the echo of a gym, the applause in the auditorium, the teacher at the front of the room, the students staring out the window, dreaming about the life waiting beyond these walls. Cooley was built for that. It was built for Detroit's future. And now, almost a century later, Detroit is preparing to remove it from the skyline of this neighborhood. Maybe the sports complex will serve another generation. Maybe kids will run where these halls once stood. Maybe new memories will be made here. I hope they are. But we should still be honest about what is being lost. Because places like Cooley remind us that history is not only downtown. It is not only mansions and skyscrapers. It's schools, churches, corner stores, neighborhood landmarks, places where ordinary people lived extraordinary pieces of their lives. And when those places disappear, the city becomes harder to read. So before Cooley is gone, we came here to document it. Not to glorify abandonment, not to celebrate decay, but to remember, to ask what could have been, to honor what was, and to make sure that when this building is no longer standing, its story still is. If you attended Cooley High School, or if someone in your family did, leave your memories in the comments. If you have old photos, yearbooks, or video from inside this building when it was still alive, share them. And if there's another Detroit landmark, school, theater, church, or historic home whose story deserves to be preserved before it is lost, tell me where to go next. Because every street is a story, every building is a memory, and every city needs people willing to remember. I'm Chris Hubble. This is Streets of History. And this was one last look inside Thomas M. Cooley High School before demolition. And if historic Detroit inspires you the way it inspires me, whether you're buying, selling, restoring, or trying to understand the story behind an old home or building, reach out. Historic real estate is more than square footage. It is memory. It is craftsmanship. It is neighborhood identity. And every home has a story. Let's discover yours.